Prime Minister Tony Blair was one of the first of the US allies to come out and say categorically that the United Kingdom stands shoulder to shoulder with the United States. He also said that Britain's interests are intimately engaged because of the high number of British casualties. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for joining us this morning. Yesterday, the President of the United States said, "We are at war. War has been declared on us." Are you prepared to say that war has been declared and that there is a state of war?
Yes, whatever the technical or legal issues about a declaration of war, the fact is we are at war with terrorism. What happened on Tuesday was an attack not just upon the United States, but upon the civilized world. The thousands of people that lost their lives included nationals of many, many countries. Probably 200-300 people from Britain will have died in that terrorist attack. That makes it, in fact, the worst terrorist attack on British citizens that there has been since the Second World War. So this is a situation that concerns us all. Our own interests are intimately engaged, quite apart from the fact that in these times it's important that America realizes that her friends right around the world stand with her.
You and other leaders have talked about a global alliance to combat this global network of terror, and there are obviously many components, including a military component. What will the United Kingdom, what will Britain do if the United States decides to go to war?
This is something obviously we are discussing with the American president, the American administration at the moment, what help we can give. And I'm very pleased at the way that America and the American administration has gone out of its way to consult its allies, to keep us fully informed so that we are part of the deliberations they're making. But we have to do two things in my view. First of all, there has to be a response to bring those terrorists who committed this attack to account, and we will play our full part in that. And secondly, there has then to be an agenda that we construct at an international level that involves the whole of the international community in dismantling the machinery of international terrorism, how it's financed, how these people move about the world, the countries that then harbour them and give them help. At every single level, we have to pursue and dismantle this machinery of terror. And that is important, not just for the purpose of bringing those people to account, but also in order to make sure that this does not happen again.
Britain has stood with the United States in most of its military campaigns of the last 10 years from the Gulf War on. Was it safe to say that if there is a military response, Britain will take part militarily? Well,
we've made it very clear that we stand side by side with the United States. And it's not a question of the United States simply saying, this is what we're going to do now, come and join us. The US is in close consultation with us and with other allies. And I think there will be a very broad support for a response that allows us to pursue and bring to account those responsible for this act and do it as an act of justice.
Do you think that the evidence is out yet? Have you been presented with what you need? You've talked about we need to know who did it, we need to see the evidence.
As President Bush said yesterday, it's fairly clear where the evidence is tending, but I think it is important that we consider the evidence in a very careful way, that it's factually based, that we are hard-headed about it. But once we have come to a conclusion, then it is important that we hold those people who are responsible for this, as I say, to account. And I think you will find, incidentally, that that is the view right round the world. I've spoken to Arab leaders in the past few days that have expressed their outrage at what has happened, their determination that this should be seen as something that the world of Islam is standing against, not merely countries like America and the United Kingdom. And I think you will find that there is enormous support for the idea that we must put together a broad-based coalition that hound these people down and that bring them to account and do it, as I say, for reasons of justice. We owe it to those people that lost their lives, to their families who are grieving, and to our own defence of democracy and liberty and freedom.
Which brings me to the question, you know, a lot of people are looking now at which country can be counted on so-called to stand with the United States and which country stand against. In the words of the US President, you're either with us or you're not. We have heard, you know, in the past, we've seen how in some attempts to build coalitions, there are some countries who don't particularly, you know, go rushing into this kind of thing. France sometimes has its own reservations, Germany has its own reservations. Do you think there will be a cohesive Gulf War-style alliance?
I do think that the whole of the civilized world will stand together, yes. And I spoke to President Chirac myself on the phone yesterday, and I can assure you, I think that the whole of Europe will stand with America on this. Because people know that what happened was not just aimed at America. It was aimed at all of us. I mean, these people believe they can achieve by mass terrorism what they cannot achieve by peaceful democratic means. And therefore, even though it is in our nature to be reasonable, to proceed very cautiously and carefully, we haven't sought this conflict. When the conflict comes, then as we've learnt before from our history, we have to be prepared to face up to it. And I think that for a long period of time, the world has turned a blind eye, been somewhat indifferent to the menace of international terrorism. And I think we're all, to an extent, culpable in that. But what we've got to do now is to realise that it exists, look at its full power and potency, realise that these people, incidentally, if they could do worse, would do worse. The number of people they kill is not limited by anything other than purely technical capability. There's no morality so far as they're concerned. And once we understand that, then I think it is important that we not merely, as I say, pursue those people who have been directly responsible and hold them to account, but then look at the way that terrorism operates, how it's financed, where it is, and how we pursue it and dismantle it.
Today there are reports, for instance, that even in England there's a bank, at least one bank, maybe more, that has been used to channel funds for propaganda for this group. There has been some radical voices in the Islamic community here calling for martyrdom.